Walk into an American grocery store in 1982, and the medicine aisle looked remarkably different. At the time, Tylenol was the undisputed leader of the pain relief market, commanding a massive 35% share of all sales. But that dominance was built on a foundation of absolute, unshielded trust. In the early 80s, medicine bottles lacked safety locks, foil seals, or any physical barriers. Manufacturers relied entirely on an unwritten honor system between the brand and the consumer. This meant the medicine itself was physically vulnerable. A standard capsule could be easily separated into two halves, allowing anyone to swap the powder inside and snap the pill back together without leaving a single mark on the packaging. In 1982, this design flaw left tens of millions of households exposed. The safety of the American public rested on the assumption that no one would ever think to use a common medicine bottle as a delivery system for a killer. In late September, that assumption vanished. Over just 48 hours, 7 people in the Chicago area died after taking what they thought was medicine. The victims included a 12-year-old girl, a flight attendant, and 3 members of a single family who all took pills from the same bottle. Toxicologists quickly identified the cause. The capsules had been laced with lethal doses of potassium cyanide. It's a poison so potent that it effectively suffocates the body's cells, often causing death within minutes of ingestion. Investigators determined the tampering was localized. Because the poisoned bottles came from different factories, but were all sold in the same region, the killer had likely pulled the bottles off random Chicago store shelves, poisoned them, and slipped them back into the displays. Panic spread instantly. News bulletins preempted local programming, warning millions of families to stop using Tylenol immediately and throw away any bottles they already owned. A common household staple had been turned into a weapon. The 1982 poisonings didn't just cause a medical crisis, they created a new, pervasive fear of the most mundane objects in our homes. The FBI launched a massive manhunt, but the killer had left them almost nothing to work with. There were no witnesses and no fingerprints. Because the bottles were tampered with in public stores, the crime scene was effectively the entire city of Chicago. Detectives chased thousands of leads. They focused on a man who sent an extortion letter demanding $1 million to stop the killings, but they could never find physical evidence connecting him to the actual poisonings. The investigation was further complicated by a wave of copycat crimes. As people across the country began reporting similar tampering in other products, the sheer volume of new cases made it impossible for the FBI to isolate the original killer's tracks. Law enforcement had hit a wall. Traditional detective work couldn't neutralize the threat, which meant as long as those bottles were on the shelves, the public remained in danger. With the police unable to find the killer, the responsibility shifted to the manufacturer. Johnson & Johnson had to decide how to respond to a threat they hadn't created, but that their product was now facilitating. On October 5, 1982, the company issued a total nationwide recall. They pulled 31 million bottles of extra-strength Tylenol from every pharmacy and grocery store in America. The financial impact was staggering. This graph shows Tylenol's market share collapsing in real time, plummeting from its 35% high down to just 8%. The recall cost the company over $100 million. Instead of downplaying the risk, the company's leadership held frequent press conferences. They were transparent about the dangers, apologized to the victims' families, and urged the public to trust their caution rather than their product. By absorbing the massive loss and speaking directly to the public, the company shifted the focus from protecting its profits to protecting its customers. It was a bet that radical transparency was the only way to eventually restore the public's broken trust. Johnson & Johnson realized that if they couldn't catch the killer, they had to make the product itself impossible to weaponize. They had to move away from the honor system and toward a hardened, mechanical defense. The company spent the next several months engineering a solution. They developed the industry's first triple seal system, designed to make tampering immediately obvious. This new standard required a glued plastic band, an airtight foil seal, and a cotton plug, creating 3 separate layers of security. The company also phased out the powder-filled capsules entirely, replacing them with solid, compressed caplets. Unlike the old tubes, these solid pills couldn't be opened or refilled, removing the killer's primary method of attack. This shift changed the nature of consumer safety. It moved the defense of the public away from the reactive work of the police and into the proactive engineering of the product itself. The corporate change soon became federal law. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act, often called the Tylenol Bill, making it a major federal crime to interfere with consumer products. Following the new law, the FDA issued a mandate requiring tamper-evident packaging for all over-the-counter medicines sold in the United States. The physical barriers J&J had invented became the legal requirement for the entire industry. The murders remain unsolved to this day, and the person responsible was never caught. However, the company's decision to prioritize safety paid off. Within a single year of the recall, Tylenol had fully regained its 35% market share. The tragedy in Chicago ended the era of naive consumer trust. It replaced the honor system with the tactile, secure reality we interact with every time we snap the plastic seal off a new bottle. While 7 people fell victim to an uncatchable perpetrator, their deaths led to a physical hardening of the American medicine cabinet. It created the mandatory safety barriers that now protect every over-the-counter bottle on the shelf.